Today's module is on knowledge framework and classification. To start with, the Indian scheme of knowledge, or IKS, is the systematic transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next generation. So the Indian knowledge system comprised of Gyan, Vigyan, Jivan Darshan that have evolved out of experience, observation, experimentation, and rigorous analysis. So it is based on the Vedic literature, the Upanishads, the Vedas, and the Upavedas, and the Indian knowledge system holds significant relevance in the contemporary times for a multitude of reasons. It serves as a vital source for cultural identity and pride, fostering a deep sense of continuity with India's rich and ancient heritage. So, of course, we have to look into what are the key principles of IKS. First is the four Purusharth, which are Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. The Panch Mahakosh, which also includes the Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Anandamaya, and the Vijnanamaya koshas. The Ashtangik Marg, which is often entailed in the tenets of Buddhism, which incorporates right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right mindfulness, right effort, and right concentration. It also incorporates Paravidya and Aparavidya. It also incorporates Three Ratna in Jainism, and lastly the three gunas, which are the Sattvic, Rajas, and Tamas guna. Now, in order to know more, we need to know that what is the knowledge triangle. So there are three major elements that are common in the knowledge creation. The first is the seeker of knowledge, the one who desires to know something, is called the pramata. And there has to be an object of knowledge, which is the entity that the seeker wants to know, which can be physical or non physical. And lastly, there has to be the means of gaining that knowledge, which is also called pramana, which is simply the method used to examine the object of knowledge. So, for example, if you have to seek knowledge about this particular module, you are using, you are the seeker of the knowledge, which is you are the pramata, and your object of knowledge is today's module, and the means of knowledge is the online mode that you are signing up for to gain this knowledge. So, when these three elements come together, knowledge or an entire prama is created. Moving forward, we'll be looking into two major things: the prameya, a Vaisheshikan approach to physical reality, as well as dravyas, which are the constituents of physical reality. Now, in order to know about this, we have to know that there are important intersections between the Nyaya and the Vaisheshika epistemology. So, in order to know more, the Nyaya epistemology considers valid and invalid categories. The valid category will take into account pratyaksha, anumana, and upamana, as well as shabda. And the invalid part will take into account the anupalabdhi and arthapati. So pratyaksha will have stages which are intermediate or which are indeterminate and determinate. Anumana can be psychological, vyapti and induction. Shabda can be Vaidika and Avaidika. So all of these things are a lot to be discussed in this particular class. So we'll be looking into the portions which are necessary for this module. So Naya is a work of the great philosopher and sage Gautama. It is a realistic philosophy which is based mainly on logical grounds, and it admits that four separate sources of true knowledge exists. As I already mentioned, it's perception or pratyaksha, it is inference or anumana, it is comparison or upamana, and it is testimony or sabda. So To talk about more of perception or pratyaksha, pratyaksha is a combination of prati and aksha. So it is basically what is one before one's eyes. Aksha means a sense organ, and prati means the function of each sense organ. So perception is a valid form of knowledge which is produced by the contact of an object with a particular sense organ. So, perception in the Gautama system is defined as the knowledge that originates from contact, which is the sannikarsa, of of a sense with its object that is determinate and non-erratic. So, according to the this particular school, perception is direct and immediate cognition, which is produced by the interaction between the object and the sense organ. So, perception needs four elements, which is the self, mind, sense organ, and the object. Now, pratyaksha can be of two types. It can be direct and indirect. So, when we call it direct perception, it is anubhava, and when it is indirect or remembered perception, it is called smriti. So, when we are talking about uh, this, we have to say that knowledge arises by the contact of the sense organ with an object. Now, the self comes into contact with the mind, the manas with the senses, and the senses with the object. That's how the entire flow uh, happens. Now, moving forward, as you can see, the objects of knowledge, according to the Nyaya, are the self, body, senses, and their objects, as I said. So, what are these? It includes cognition, mind, activity, mental defects, rebirth, the feeling of pleasure and pain, suffering, and freedom from suffering. Now, what about the Vaisheshika system? The Vaisheshika system was founded by the philosopher and sage Kannada. The Vaisheshika is allied to the Nyaya system and has the same end view, namely the liberation of the individual self. So basically, both of the school talks about the liberation of the individual self from the suffering which is caused because of not knowing or having the right knowledge. So, according to the Vaisheshika school, it brings the objects of knowledge, the whole world, under the seven categories of substance or dravya. Dravya, quality or guna, action or karma, generality or samanya, particularity or vishesha, the relation of inherence or samavaya, and non existence, which is abhava. Now, with regard to God and liberation of the individual soul, the Vaisheshika theory is substantially the same as that of the Nyaya. Moving on, the Nyaya philosophy believes that knowledge reveals both the subject and the object. So they are quite distinct from knowledge. And knowledge is the revelation or manifestation of the object. So basically, if you take a metaphor of a lampshade, the lampshade, if you switch it on, the light it casts on the area will be able to manifest the objects or the things which are there present in that particular area. So that's how that particular casting, or the casting of the light, is the very function of knowledge according to the Naya philosophy, where it allows the revelation or the manifestation of the objects that come under that particular the light casted area. Now, according to the school, of course, knowledge can be valid or invalid. Now, how do we know whether it is valid or invalid? Naya maintains a theory of correspondence. No, now, knowledge, in order to be valid, must correspond to reality. So, it has to be in line with reality. Now, valid knowledge is produced by the four valid means of knowledge, which are perception, inference, comparison, and testimony. Lastly, invalid knowledge includes memory, which is smriti, doubt, which is samasya, error, and hypothetical reasoning or tarka. Now, a cause is defined as an unconditional and invariable antecedent of an effect. Now, the same cause produces the same effect, and the same effect is produced by the same cause. And according to this philosophy, according to this school of thought, plurality of a cause is ruled out. So basically, it talks about that there can be only one cause, and that cause can only have one effect. So every effect will be having one cause, and every cause will be having one single effect. But it cannot have different causes, different, one single cause cannot have different effects. That's the main point of it. Now, God is an eternal, infinite self who creates, maintains, and destroys the world according to this philosophy. Now, originally, if we talk about the Vaisheshika school, it believed in six categories, and the seventh, that is of abhava or negation, was added later on. So, what are the seven padharths that we are considering here? The first one is substance or dravya, which we will look into in detail. The second is quality or guna, as I said, activity, generality, particularity, inherence, and non-being. Now, what is dravya? Dravya is the substance which is defined as the substratum where the actions and qualities in here, and which is the coexistent material cause of the composite things that produce from it. Now, what are the nine substances that are incorporated here? It is earth or prithvi, water, fire, air, ether, time, space, spirit, and mind. So the Vaisheshika philosophy is pluralistic and realistic, but it is not materialistic since it admits the spiritual substances. And the Vaisheshika conception that liberation is the real state of the soul free from all qualities, and it reduces the soul to a mere nothing. So basically, if you take out all the qualities from the soul has nothing else in it. And that is exactly what uh, is meant by liberation according to this school. Now, we will be looking into what are the attributes or the properties of substances and action. We'll also look into what is action as the driver of conjunction and disjunction. So to talk with, so to begin with, an attribute or guna is defined as that which exists in a substance and has no quality or activity in it. So a substance exists just by itself and is the constituent cause of the things. An attribute is itself attributeless or nirguna, to be precise. An attribute is a static property of things, and it hangs on it hangs on the thing as something passive and inactive, nishkriya. So it is different from both the substance and action. There are altogether 24 kinds of attributes, which is listed over here, that incorporates color, taste, smell, touch, sound, number, magnitude, differentia, conjunction, disjunction, remoteness, nearness, fluidity, viscidity, knowledge, pleasure, pain, desire, aversion, effort, heaviness, merit, demerit, and faculty. All the attributes do not admit of the sense perception. Now, to talk about karma. Karma or action resides only in finite substances like the earth, water, fire, wind, and mind. It produces effects in its own substratum and other places. So, what are the unique features of karma in the Vaisheshika school? It's that it has action kernels, and it is opposed to its effect, as in action is inherently opposed to its effect, similar to the Newton's third law of motion. For example, the motion of a thrown ball will eventually lead to its stopping. So basically it will have an effect on what it's initiating. Now, what can be the types of actions that we can discuss over here? The Vaisheshika system actually classifies the action into five types. There can be upward motion, which results in the contact with an upper region, the downward motion, which results in the contact with the lower region. There can be contraction, there can be expansion, there can be general motion, which is which we in other words call gamanam, which includes the rotation and other types of motion as well. Now, what can be the causes of action? There can be different causes of action that can be attributed to a lot of things, just like gravity, as in the heaviness that causes the downward motion. Effort. The second one is effort, where there is a personal exertion that can cause motion. What is fluidity, which is the third cause? It causes the motion in liquids. And the unperceivable causes, which we call adrishta, used to explain actions like the attraction between a magnet and a metallic needle. And the laws of motion in Vaisheshika. So the Vaisheshika system also includes the concepts similar to the modern laws of motion. There can be no motion without impulse, which is similar to the Newton's first law, stating that an object that at rest remains at rest unless acted upon by an external force. And the second one is that action opposed to its effect, which implies that perpetual motion is impossible, similar to the Newton's third law. So, with this, we move on to the Samanya, Vishesha, and the Samavaya components. So, the Samanya is the fourth category of Padharth and refers to generality or universals. So, basically, the common nature shared by different individual things. For example, although cows may differ in color or shape, they share a common essence called the cowness or the gotva, which allows us to recognize them all as cows. Now, this what is the sameness? The sameness or universal exists in the dravya that we discussed on. It also exists on the guna or the quality, and also the karma that we also discussed earlier, and is considered as a real and independent entity that resides in them. Please mark the uh, highlighted words over here. So the universals can be of two types. There can be the highest universal, there can be the lower or the intermediate universal. So what is the highest universal? Highest universal can be the most general universal, or the satta. Satta, which is present in everything. Apparijati, or the lower or the intermediate universals, are the more specific categories, such as the dravyaness or the gunaness or the karmaness, or the further specific ones like the gotva, the cowness or the blueness, etc. A jati or universal may appear as both the genus and species depending on perspective. But species has no independent reality apart from jati. And the Buddhist philosophers rejected real universals, arguing that the apoha theory, that recognizing a cow simply means that we are excluding all the non-cows. This was according to the Buddhist view. However, the Nyaya and the Vaisheshika philosophers rejected this view. Why? Because they stated that recognizing a cow is a positive perception of a real universal. You have to understand the difference between the real universal and the particulars. So it's not merely the negation of others. Now, jati or universal is eternal, and even if individual objects perish, the universal they belong to continues to exist. So, in short, the samanya is the real, eternal, universal quality that explains why many things can be recognized as belonging to the same class. Now, moving on to the Vishesha. What is a Vishesha? Vishesha refers to the principle of particularity or individuality through which things are perceived as distinct and diverse from one another. Now, since every sensation we receive from the external world is different, this diversity is explained by the specific differences present in the ultimate entities or atoms. Now, these specific differences of the Vishesha exists eternally in the atoms, individual souls, and minds. Now, because of these inherent particularities, each atom or entity remains uniquely distinct from others. So, advanced spiritual perceivers like the yogins are believed to be capable of directly perceiving these differences among atoms. So, in short, in conclusion, we can say that Vishesha is the eternal principle that accounts for the individuality and distinctness of fundamental entities like atoms, souls, and minds. Moving on, what is the Samavaya? Samavaya is an inseparable relation of inherence that connects two distinct entities so closely that they appear as one unified whole. So basically, it explains relationships between the substances and attribute, or the dravya guna, substance and action, or the dravya karma, substance and universal, which is the dravya and samanya, cause and effect, which is the karana and karya, and the atoms and vishesha. So because of samavaya, these different entities appeared indissolubly connected, forming a single inseparable reality, for example, clay and the jug made from it. So, this differs from some yoga or contact. How? Because some yoga or contact occurs between separate objects that can be connected and later separated. For example, a pen which is placed on a table. But Samavaya, however, is an inseparable relation. It is Ayuta Siddha, where the connected entities cannot exist independently of the relation, as it was said in the example that a clay and the jug which is made from it. So Samavaya is considered as separate and unique category in the Nyaya Vaisheshika philosophy. Unlike contact, it is single and eternal because it has no cause and is not produced. Now, even an object like jug is destroyed, the principle of samavaya itself remains eternal. Now, moving on to what we know as pramana. So, it's the basic subject matter of the Naya Darshana, and it's a search of the means and methods of fundamental truth that is focused here. Now, uh, to be precise, there are 16 categories that we discuss while talking about pramana, which is the when we discuss about the Naya Darshana, so which are pramana, prameya, the samasya, prayojana, drishtanta, siddhanta, etc., as listed. Now, and how a true knowledge of them enables one to attain moksha or liberation is also delineated in this particular darshana. Now, to talk about pramana more, pramana is basically the source of knowledge, which is uh, which is in more simple terms. So, the general science of inference is logic, and its aim is to make explicit the rules by which inferences are drawn. Now, inferences are rule governed steps from one or more propositions known as premises to one another proposition called the conclusion. So, we talk about premises and conclusion. A deductive inference, we'll also see this portion later, but still, as an introduction, I am kind of introducing this here. A deductive inference is one that is intended to be valid, whereas a valid inference is one in which the conclusion must be true if the premises are true. All other inferences are inductive. Now, uh, the four major factors which are involved in knowledge are, as it was discussed earlier as well, it is the pramata, prameya, pramana, which is the means of valid knowledge, and prama. So, when we are talking about the different schools of knowledge, whether it accepts or rejects different facets of these methods, it can be suggested that all the methods are accepted by the Mimamsa school. Only perception, inference, testimony is accepted by the Samkhya and Yoga. Only perception and inference is accepted by Buddhism and Vaisheshika, and only perception is accepted by the Charvaka school. And when we are talking about Pramana as the valid means of knowledge, there are four important means. One is the Pratyaksha, as I delineated, as I talked about earlier, the Anumana, or and next is the Upamana and the Shabda. As I give a very brief introduction to Pratyaksha, I might also give a very brief introduction to what is Anumana, Sabda, Upamana, Arthapati, as well as Anupalabdhi. So Anumana is the this word indicates a knowledge after earlier knowledge. So basically anu means after and mana means knowledge. So it is the second source of valid knowledge. Inference is defined as the knowledge of an object due to the previous knowledge of some sign or mark. So Gautama defines it as a specific form of knowledge preceded by perception. And again, the perception, uh, again, this particular perception of the invariable relation between the proban and the probandum is a previous perception of such a relationship somewhere else. Now, when we are talking about sabda or verbal testimony, we are talking about the fourth and the valid source of knowledge, wherein it's the combination of words that does not the sabda means the word. Now when we are talking about verbal testimony, we are talking about some source of these words which are coming from a valid mean, from a valid source. So um the Gautama stated in the Naya school that the verbal knowledge is of two kinds. One is relating to the perceptible objects, and another is which deals with the imperceptible object, which is called the ardrishta. For example, honesty is the best policy. So these are some of the things that we talk about when discussing about the sabda or verbal testimony. And when we are talking about upamana or comparison, it's simply the combination of the words upa and mana, where upa means similarity and mana means cognition. So thus upamana is the knowledge derived from similarity, and it has been defined as the knowledge of relation between a person and its denotation. So upamana becomes another valid source of knowledge. When we are talking about arthapati, it is presumption. So it is an independent source of knowledge, and it is admitted as a distinct pramana that cannot be brought under anumana or sabda. It consists in the assumption of some unperceived fact in order to explain apparently inconsistent facts. So, for example, if we take that Devdatta is alive and he is not present in this house, we presume that he is elsewhere. That's simply how Arthapati works. And when we are talking about Anupalabdhi, it is, according to Kumarila Bhatta and others, non comprehension or Anupalabdhi is the sixth independent source of knowledge that consists in the representative knowledge of negative facts. In other words, negative facts are cognized by a special instrument or karana called non apprehension. So, Kumarila argues that the concept of emptiness of the container inevitably presupposes the non existence. So, he also refutes that Naya view that non apprehension is the same as perception or inference. Now, over here, the pramana or the means of right knowledge is again divided as it is already suggested. And pramana, it's also important that there are the main characteristics of pramana are assuredness, truth, and presentation. So the knowledge which is imparted by pramana has to be true, and Naya states that the knowledge which is true has with it the ability to correspond to facts. That's how we know that it is right knowledge. Now, what comes while talking about right knowledge is that there can be doubts, there can be samasya. Now, why does the first point suggest that the doubt is a catalyst for knowledge? For example, if you have doubt in solving a particular mathematical equation, you would again sit with your book, or let's say any other source or resource where you can find the solution to the problem. So your doubt will act as a catalyst of sitting with your book to gain new knowledge or more knowledge or advance your knowledge on whatever you already know. So that's how doubt can act as a catalyst for knowledge anywhere, in any field, or in any situation possible. So there can be five types of doubt. The doubts due to common properties. For example, when you see that two objects have common properties, you might have a doubt that uh, how can we make the two objects distinct from each other. The next is doubt due to lack of uncommon properties. The next is doubt due to contradictory opinions. The next is doubt due to inconsistent cognition. So that can, and lastly, the doubt can be due to non-cognition as well, which is similar to anupalavdi, which I discussed a few moments earlier. So the four pramanas, as I said, that is perception, inference, comparison, and testimony or verbal testimony, can be used to resolve this uncertainty and gain valid knowledge. That is why pramana, I discussed pramana earlier than samasya, because uh, that was the base of understanding of resolving how of resolving the doubts or samasya that can uh, that can occur, that is a common occurrence whenever we are in the path of seeking right knowledge. Now, how can we provide a framework for establishing a valid knowledge? What are the key elements? Of course, the key elements has to be the objects of knowledge, the means of knowledge. In fact, the seeker of knowledge has to be also be present over here, which I have not listed, but it is implied. And lastly, samasya has to be there. Now, what are the psychological features which has to be taken into account? Which is a purpose or a goal that motivates inquiry. Of course, has to be there. A samasya, which is a doubt or uncertainty. So basically, samasya can be listed as both the key element as well as a psychological feature, which prompts investigation. And siddhanta, or the established conclusion that resolves the doubt. And the nirnaya, the existing body of knowledge, of accepted knowledge, which gets updated when new conclusions are reached. So what are the procedural aspect and the logical aspect of it? The arguments, the types of arguments that we come across are the vada, which is the constructive dialogue which is aimed at discovering truth. The the yalpa, which is the debate focused on winning the argument, sometimes using rhetorical tricks. The third is the Vitanda, which is the argument that only refutes the opponent without presenting an independent thesis. And lastly, the logical aspect involves avoiding fallacies and formulating good hypotheses in order to test the right knowledge. So, we'll be discussing fallacies shortly. Before that, what is the deductive or the inductive logic framework? Now, Naya or the Naya epistemology basically proposes a five-step model for presenting the arguments in the Vada, combining elements of both deductive and inductive reasoning. So it has to have the hypothesis. Hypothesis is basically the stating the proposition or claim that needs to be proven. There has to be a hetu or reason. This step involves the main reason or evidence supporting the hypothesis. The next, there has to be udharan or the general rule or example. This step involves stating a general rule that connects the reason or the hetu to the proposition or the hypothesis, and providing a well-known example that illustrates this rule. The fourth one is the upanaya or application, because only providing hypothesis and giving the reason will or reason or the example won't help. There has to be an application. So this step demonstrates the similarity between the example and the current case being discussed, strengthening the argument further. The last is nigamana or the conclusion, and this step reiterates the proposition as a proven conclusion, highlighting that the ambiguity has been resolved. So that's how a deductive or inductive logic framework looks like according to the Nyaya school. Now, what are the potential fallacies in the reasoning process? I've listed a particular link over here, uh, which provides a document which has a list of all the logical fallacies that we come across. It is also called the Hetvabhas according to the ancient Indian fallacy system. So, Hetvabhas is basically the Sanskrit term which means fallacy in the English language, and it means that the Indian logic system of fallacy is termed Hetvabhas, and here the middle term appears to be the reason but is not the valid reason. So there can be five kinds of valid major fallacies that I might discuss, um, which is the asiddhya. Asiddhya is basically the fallacy of the unproved middle. The middle term must be present in the minor term, and if not, it is unproved. There can be within the ashiddha, there is ashraya asiddha, there is swarupa asiddha, and there is also the vapatya asiddha. The second one is the swavichara or the anayakantika. So this is basically the fallacy of the irregular middle. This is again of three types, which is sadharana. Here basically the middle term is too wide. It is taken as a mixed land. It is taken as if it's present in the positive as well as the negative instances both. For example, the hill has fire because it is knowable. Here knowable is present in the fiery as well as in the non-fiery object. So basically it's too wide. The middle term it's spread out. The next one is asadharan, wherein asadharana, where the middle term is too narrow. It's like the opposite, almost the opposite. It is present only in a paksha, and it is present neither in the sapaksha or the positive sense and the vipaksha or the negative sense. It violates the rule that the middle term should be present in the sapaksha. So, for example, sound is eternal because it is audible. So, here audibility belongs to the sound only, and it is present nowhere else. So, you see how narrow the particular term has gotten. The third type over here is the anupasamhari, which wherein the middle term is non-exclusive. So the minor term is all inclusive and leaves nothing by the way of sapaksha or vipaksha. For example, all things are non-eternal because they are knowable. And the third type is the sat pratipaksha. Sat pratipaksha consists of two terms, which is sat and pratipaksha. The middle term is contradicted by another middle term in this case, where the reason is counterbalanced by another reason. For example, sound is eternal because it is audible, and sound is non-eternal because it is produced. Here, audible is counterbalanced by the term produced, as both are of equal force. So that how Sat Pratipaksha works. That's how it works. The fourth one is Badhita. Badhita, as you can very much infer from the term, that there is a badha or a particular restraint, there is a prohibition. So it is a non-inferentially contradicted middle. The middle term is contradicted by some other pramana and not by inference. So it cannot prove the major term, which is disproved by another stronger source of valid knowledge. For example, fire is cold because it is a substance. So the middle term, substance, is directly contradicted by perception. The last one, which is viruddha, it is again the contradictory middle, wherein the middle term, instead of being pervaded by the presence of the major term, is pervaded by the absence of the major term. Instead of proving the existence of the major term in the minor term, it proves its non-existence therein. For example, sound is eternal because it is produced. Here, produced, instead of proving the eternity of sound, proves its non-eternity. So these are some of the fallacies that have been talked about. There are some of the other logical fallacies, like the strawman argument, or the hominem, etc., ad hominem, etc. So not going much into it because it has already been listed. I just talked much about the fallacies which are relevant to the ancient Indian fallacy system. Now, lastly, what I already talked about is the conclusion or the siddhanta, which are the established tenets in the field of study. So Naya identifies that there are four types of siddhanta. There can be universally accepted tenets. For example, fire produces heat, and there can be school specific tenets. For example, as we were already discussing much about the Nyaya Vaisheshika view, that the atoms or the Paramanu are the fundamental building blocks of matter. It is specific to the school. It is not universally accepted. It is totally contradicted. It is totally not accepted by any other school like the Advaita Vedanta, Buddhist, etc. Buddhism, etc. So the third one is the Adhikarana Siddhantas, which are the governing principles. Now, what can be these? Example can be the existence of the self or Atman established through reasoning, which then explains memory, cognition, and moral responsibility. The last one is hypothetical principles, where we assume certain things, because we are talking about hypothesis. So we are assuming certain things, for example, assuming that the world is unreal, and then we are stating what can be the possible facts that can suggest that uh, that can suggest that that can either suggest that the world is unreal, or whether it can contradict it elsewhere. So, Siddhanta plays a crucial role in knowledge creation by providing a framework for evaluating new knowledge claims. New knowledge must be consistent with the established tenets to ensure coherence and avoid contradictions. Obviously, new knowledge has to be in line with the older knowledge, or it has to advance the older knowledge, because otherwise there can be no conclusion to any of the field of studies that is undertaken, or any of the topics that are undertaken for further investigation. So with that, we are coming to the end of the particular lecture, and I know that there is a lot of new things, lot of terminologies that are really new, that might be new for a lot of you. So if you face any kind of difficulty, then please do feel free to contact me on campus. And these were some of the references from which I had made the presentation. So with that, thank you, and thank you for attending my particular lecture on knowledge framework and classifications. Hope it was of great help.